Hello, my football friends. This is Darren Hayes of pigskindispatch.com. Welcome once again to the Pig Pen, your portal to positive football history. And it is time for some great gridiron information from yesteryear. Timothy P. Brown of footballarchaeology.com joins us to tell us about one of his recent articles he's posted on the website. Tim, welcome to the Pig Pen.
Thank you for having me, Darren. Look forward to chatting with you tonight as always.
Yeah, and this is a very relevant within the last month anyway of this article that you wrote. You had it titled Travis, Taylor, and Teddy Roosevelt. And I know that at least two of those names were ones that my wife and daughter, why they became interested in watching at least the AFC side of the NFL playoffs and the Super Bowl, were at least one of those names was interesting.
Yeah.
So how do that at least the Travis and the Taylor I'm thinking of and Teddy Roosevelt, how do they tie in together in this piece that you wrote?
Okay, so I'm a little surprised that you're familiar with Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift. That's interesting because a lot of people wouldn't even know who they are, but you're kind of tuned in to this stuff, I guess.
Yeah,
This pop culture.
didn't Patrick Mahomes and Usher appear on their show that they had on Sunday night a few weeks ago?
I have no idea. So yeah, so I mean, one of the things that just struck me is, people going all gaga, not Lady Gaga, but just people going nuts about Travis and Taylor. Some, angry about it for some reason or another, and others just excited because they're big Taylor fans. The Swifties. So, anyways, it just got me thinking about, okay, what are some similar kinds of situations in the past in the sports world, where somebody who is, a love interest or familial interest, kind of brings, who's from another field, brings some kind of excitement. So I was thinking about, okay, Joe DiMaggio and Marilyn Monroe, right?
That's an
And
obvious
obviously,
one you think about, right?
but then I went to Teddy Roosevelt and his son Teddy. So, back in 1905, President Teddy Roosevelt has this meeting with Princeton, Yale, and Harvard, and basically says, you got to get your act together, get the football communities to act together. This game's too dangerous. Do something about it. And then he sends them away. And but the interesting thing about it was, I mean, Roosevelt was a big football fan. He was too late, or he's too old to have ever played the game because it really didn't appear until the time he was out of college. But but he was a rough and tough guy, and so his oldest son, Teddy Jr., ends up he's a freshman at Harvard in 1905, and he had played. I think he went to Choate, but he went to an Eastern prep school, and had not played much because he was like 5'8" by the time he got to Harvard, but he was pretty lightly built or slightly built. So so he goes out for the freshman team, and it's one of those things. Yeah, the president's kid, everybody's pretty doubtful about him. He's not the biggest guy in the world. It turns out that he was a pretty tough little nut. And so, I mean, everything I read just said, hey, people kind of came off the field. His opponents would come off and go like, he's not the biggest guy, but he's pretty tough. And so, anyways, they play whatever, a 5 or 6 game schedule. And somewhere early in the year, I think they were playing like Worcester Poly or somebody like that. He apparently broke his nose in a game early in the year. And so
Hmm.
then, gets better. I don't know if he wore a nose guard or not, but the final game of the Harvard freshman season is a game against the Yale freshman. And, it's a big deal. And so in that game, and I should say that, just like everything was getting documented and there were paparazzi, you know, surrounding Travis and Taylor. The same thing happened with Teddy Jr. People are taking pictures of him everywhere he goes. There's reporters trailing him. So the kid just, he's struggling to have a normal college freshman life because his dad's the president of the country. And, he's apparently handled all that really well too. So in the lead up to the Yale game, the Yale folks are all like, hey, I want to play right end this game because Teddy was the left end for uh, Harvard. And that was days you're playing both ways. So it turned out that Yale didn't change their lineup, but the guy who was their Yale's right end on the freshman team was kind of the captain of the freshmen, and then as a senior, he was a captain of the Yale team. So he's a real good ball player. And so he's up against Teddy the whole game, and sounds like he was kind of beating Teddy's butt, but he hung in. Teddy hung in there. He made some pretty good tackles, made some good plays, but in the course of the towards somewhere like in the second half, he apparently broke his nose again and had big black eyes, and so he left the game with a few minutes left to play. And so then but it was written up, a syndicated article shows up in newspapers nationwide. There were pictures of him in these newspapers. There were cartoons about him. And so then season ends, and then he actually started gaining a little bit of weight. And as a sophomore, he went out for the varsity, and they still tell him, "No, you're too small. You can't play with the big boys." So he might have played for his class team or something. But then as a junior, he goes out again, and I think it sounded like he was kind of holding his own. But then he was injured during the preseason, and that basically that was the end of his playing career. So the other thing that was interesting about him, he was like, I think he was like president or CEO of American Express. I mean, he had a big, business career. I mean, he was obviously a well-connected person, but, nevertheless, he sounds like, pretty stellar guy. And
pretty bully guy, huh?
yeah, that's, yes. So he ended up, when World War II, came around, he had volunteered. I think he had served in World War One as well. And he, anyways, he was on he was a general, and he was on he was in the first wave at D-Day. Was, kind of, there's stories that, he was inspiring guys to try to get over the sandbars and, keep moving. So he was, trying to coordinate a lot of that effort. And, as a result of that, he was recommended for the Distinguished Service Cross. And then but he ended up dying of a heart attack 2 weeks later. And so they ended up awarding him the Congressional Medal of Honor, instead. So they upgraded the DSC to the Medal of Honor.
You make it through probably one of the most stressful situations in world history on D-Day, and 2 weeks later, I'm sure things weren't pleasant for him then, but still, you would think the D-Day would be the really stressful part of that. Wow. The irony of it.
Yeah. So anyways, I mean, everything I can tell, pretty much of a guy to be admired, and just tried to be as normal a person as he could, despite who his father was. So
yeah, when you're living in that big of a shadow, that's probably a lot rougher than most normal people have ever experienced, and I'm sure it's not an easy thing to overcome. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Great story. Now, it almost reminds me a little bit. I was interviewing Craig Colquitt just a little while ago, and he ended up, he played for the University of Tennessee in college, and his right before his junior year, that's when Johnny Majors left Pitt, won the national championship with Dorsett, and that went to Tennessee, took over the program, and that's where he's from. And of course, and I can remember, I was a youngster then, but watching and, Lee Majors was a $6 million man at that time, and he was always on the sidelines. And of course, his wife was Farrah Fawcett. She was on there. So we talked a little bit about that. And Craig was a punter, so he wasn't, he only had to worry about a few handful of plays each game. And he told me, he goes, yeah, he goes, that was distracting. He goes, but the worst thing was on the sideline is Johnny Majors loved to have celebrities there. He was friends with Jimmy Buffett, and Jimmy Buffett would be on the sidelines and wearing I forget whose jersey he was wearing. I think one of the receivers or something. That name escapes me. The guy played for the Patriots after I had a great career in the NFL, but he would always wear his jersey. And he said Jimmy Buffett was always like where the special teams was, and of course, the fans and everything. We get trying to look and see Farrah Fawcett and Lee Majors. I'm like, man, I can't even imagine that on a sideline today, and especially in college football. These coaches are so stoic. You would never see Nick Saban allow something like that or something like
Yeah.
that. But
Yeah. Well, it's um, for a while the NCAA was going to make a move to reduce the number of people that can be on the sidelines. But when you see like the USC UCLA game, that's one of the games where
right.
there's always celebs, uh, just because the location and some of their alums. So
Yeah, it's exciting
um,
enough to see like former players that played for that school show
yeah,
up. Joe Burrow shows up on the LSU sideline, or it's kind of cool to see that. The guys that have made it, and but yeah, when you have these Hollywood stars showing up, that's altogether different. And
yeah,
Taylor Swift, whole different story there. It's
it's an amazing. I mean, that whole phenomena is just amazing to me. I mean, I don't have any. I'm not a fan of hers. I don't. I'm just indifferent, right? But I, obviously admire, what she's done from a career standpoint and
right.
the influence she has. I think, I mean, good for her, right?
And I
But
think the NFL likes the extra exposure to new
oh,
audiences
yeah, yeah,
to
yeah,
watch their product. So yeah, brilliant. Not fun as a traditional football fan of going to the stands after every play, but NFL for ratings and because the NFL
yeah.
needs the
I mean,
money, so they got to get that.
they do it, with mothers, sisters, all the stuff. I can't
Hmm.
think of the guy's name. Um, former quarterback at Notre Dame. They always had his sister and his girlfriend, and yeah,
Right,
yada
right.
yada. I mean, if they think there's a story there, they're gonna play it up, and they do all those. Let's step away for a minute and listen to the story of you know Bobby Joe Smith, right? It's like in the Olympics. They do
Hmm.
that all the time because nobody
Right,
knows who the speed skater is, but
right.
so they step away and do the profiles, and yeah, it's pretty. It's kind of the same thing.
Yeah, it's all in the ratings. All in the ratings. Well, Tim, that was a great story, and taking us back, 100 and some years ago, and tying into some modern stories of football. So that's brilliantly done and a great story. And I appreciate you letting us know and filling us in on Teddy Jr. a little bit, and his heroics on the football field and on the battlefield, and somebody that should be honored and remembered. And I
Yeah,
appreciate you doing that. And you do a lot of that where not only people being remembered and preserved, but also, events and little intricacies of the gridiron on your footballarchaeology.com website. Maybe you could tell the listeners how they can partake in that and enjoy your website.
yeah. So you just go to the site, and you can just go and browse. But the best thing to do is just subscribe. If you subscribe for free, you get access to about a third of the content. The paid subscription is $5 a month or $50 a year, and then that gives you access to everything, including all of the archives. So, um, and then I also post on Threads and on Twitter. So, if you kind of want to monitor things that way, then have at it as well.
All right. Well, very good, Tim. We really appreciate you coming on and sharing this little bites size chunks of football history and over 100 year span, but different instances. And we appreciate it. And we would love to talk to you again next week about some more great football history.
Very good. Thank you, Darren.